So with that, I'd like to begin our introductions and welcome our two speakers, Lucille Davy and Kenny Jones. Lucille Davy serves as a senior advisor with the Hunt Institute for Educational Leadership and Policy. She focuses primarily on the implementation of the Common Core state standards. She previously served 4.5 years at the New Jersey Commissioner of Education, leading an agency responsible for preschool through 12th grade education in the state of New Jersey. She's been a mathematics major, an attorney, and a certified math instructor, and has taught at both secondary and college levels. We are so pleased that Lucille is giving us her time this afternoon, and I'm sure she'll have a lot to offer. Our second presenter is Kenny Jones, and Kenny is completing his 29th year as a professional educator. He was a classroom teacher for 11 years, teaching in both 4th and 6th grade. He was a middle school assistant principal for 3 years prior to taking over as principal of Parkside Elementary School in Powell, Wyoming. He's one of our outstanding principals, and we are so pleased that he is here to present a practitioner's point of view on the Common Core. Kenny has been a principal for a long time, 15 years, and during the summer of 2006, Kenny also served as interim superintendent of Park County School District No. 1. He served on the Wyoming Association of Elementary and Middle School Principals Executive Board for 11 years and is currently completing his 3rd year as Zone 7 Director of the NAESP Executive Board. He is currently a member of Wyoming's Literacy Advisory Board. With that, we are so pleased to have you both with us. I will turn the session over to Lucille.
Thanks, Honor. Delighted to be with all of you today. So just to begin, we're going to talk a little bit about the background and history of the standards quickly. This conversation really started in 1983 when the book, A Nation at Risk, or the report, was published, which was a recognition really that the country needed to pay more attention to the education outcomes of our students. The standards movement began in the mid-90s, after people talked about a nation at risk and how we should approach it. And in the mid-90s, states began to voluntarily adopt standards in the content areas, statements of the kinds of things that young people needed to learn at each grade level in specific content areas. And that was done voluntarily by states. Some of those states also created assessments aligned to the standards, and they administered those assessments to students at different grade levels. In many cases, it was just once at the elementary level, once at the middle grade level, and once in high school. But again, it wasn't uniform, and not everyone did it across the country. In 2002, No Child Left Behind, upon adoption, required that every state adopt standards in language arts and mathematics and science, and that they administer assessments in grades 3 through 8 and 11. Next slide, please. So when we think about then, why common standards, what's wrong with the No Child Left Behind means of having each state do this work individually? And really there's lots of reasons, not the least of which is the fact that the workforce has changed, and the demands of entry-level workers has really been impacted by technology significantly. And the jobs that are growing in this country require more skills. They often are STEM related in medicine and other science and technology and math and engineering related fields. One quick example is in the banking industry, for example. There was a time when we took our paychecks to the bank and we deposited them, and then we took some cash out so that we'd have some money to spend and buy our groceries. And today you can do all of that electronically. Your check can be deposited directly. You can use a debit card to buy your gas and to buy your groceries and to do just about anything. And so the jobs in the 21st century have a lot of technology embedded within them, and therefore they require a different set of skills. So it's no longer good enough to have students leave high school on 2 different pathways, the pre-college or the college prep pathway or the workforce pathway. Those skills have now converged, and really the influence of technology in just about everything we do in our daily lives has created that. In addition, we know that too many students were leaving high school unprepared for the demands of college and the workforce, and remediation rates in colleges across the country have really grown exponentially. And it's not just the two-year colleges that might have you know, few or no entry requirements. This is an issue at our four-year colleges as well. And those remediation rates, the fact that students have to kind of redo work that they should have learned and mastered in high school, not only impacts their completion and whether or not they finish and get a degree, but it also impacts financially those students because they're paying twice basically to get the high school work. And in many cases they use financial aid or they take college courses that they're paying for, and then they drop out of the college program, never get a degree, and therefore they've spent money that's really yielded no results. In addition, we know that there are jobs open right now across this country despite the unemployment rates being, you know, higher historically. There are 2 to 3 million jobs open right now across this country, and they can't find workers that have the skills to match those jobs. And in many cases, those are skills that are higher than what were traditionally needed in the past. So it's really important for us to prepare students better so that when they exit high school, they are ready for the workforce and the skills the workforce demands, and they're also ready to do college entry-level credit-bearing coursework. There's also an opportunity with states working together to get better instructional materials. If as we have now, you know, 46 states have adopted these standards, they are educating almost 90% of the students in the United States. It gives us a great platform for the development of materials. It gives vendors an incentive to create well-aligned instructional materials, and certainly that gives the states more leverage to get better instructional materials than those states would have had individually on their own in the past. And in many cases where states do not do textbook adoption at the state level, that gives them an opportunity to have better materials prepared from which teachers and principals and you know, educators can choose. In addition, instead of creating assessments state by state, that work can be done collaboratively as well. And there are 2 consortia working on this across the country right now. That should save states money in test development that can then be directed instead into professional development and into resources for the classroom. And of course, PD is another one of those critical elements of implementation, and without having to design professional development district by district or state by state, the Common Core standards give us an opportunity to share that across the country. We can't forget about student mobility. Families often move, not by choice because of jobs that have moved, or there are family issues where you need to move closer to other family members. There are also children of military families who are moved around from place to place, oftentimes multiple times in their K-12 schooling career. And those parents need to know that their children won't have gaps in their education and their learning as they move from state to state. So a set of common expectations from one state to the next means that families can move without being concerned about whether or not their children are going to be shortchanged. And of course, this idea of high expectations for all students, recognizing that we should give every child an opportunity to have a choice at the end of high school to enter the workforce or to go to college and to be ready for the demands of either and to be successful. Can you move to the next slide, please? So this is a graphic of the jobs that are out there today and the difference from 1973, the kinds of skills that were needed, and it looks at 2007 and then looks forward to 2018. And the blue shaded parts of the bars are those jobs, the percent of jobs that require some kind of post-secondary education. Not necessarily a college degree, a 2-year or 4-year degree, but some training or advanced certification. And in 1973, you can see that was a very small percentage of the jobs. So most young people could leave high school with a diploma and go right into the workforce and be successful. Now you fast forward to 2007, and as we look ahead to 2018, you see that the number of jobs that will be there for high school dropouts has shrunk from almost a third down to 10%. For high school graduates is about 28%. The bulk of the jobs being created today and in the future are going to require something more than a high school diploma, which is really the critical reason why we must prepare all children while they're in the K-12 system to be able to enter the workforce in those jobs and to be able to do post-secondary education programs. Next slide, please. So this is a voluntary effort among the states. These conversations began back in 2005. Governors understood the economic impact of needing a highly skilled workforce. And really, we're not competing state to state anymore. This is an international, global economy. Work that used to be done only in the neighboring community can now be done anywhere across the globe, given technology. And so jobs can be outsourced. They can be done in other places with less expensive labor. So it's really important. And governors understand this, and so do state education leaders, that they really need to focus on ensuring that all children leave the K-12 system with the skills that will allow them to be successful. So the Governors Association, NGA, and the Chief State School Officers, which is the state superintendents from across the country, CCSSO, came together to lead this effort. It was open, it was collaborative, there was lots of opportunity for public comment, for input from the states. States held hearings and conducted reviews. There were lots of individuals who participated on writing teams, on review teams of what was being drafted. There were multiple drafts and lots of input from many different groups and from many different levels. There was also a validation committee made up of experts from the ELA and math communities from throughout the country in both K-12 and higher ed to really take a look at the finished product, to say, yes, these are the right standards for the children in the states who are adopting Common Core. Next slide, please. So the development process, as I said, was very wide and transparent, had a lot of input from K-12, from higher ed, from the business community, from researchers, from experts, from parents, from the public at large. These standards were built on the best of existing state standards. They were research-based. People looked at what we had learned from standards experience in the past, and frankly, how the standards in high-performing countries were written. So we looked at, what were they doing in these other countries where students continued and sustained their math achievement right through high school, which is unlike what was happening in the United States. The standards are fewer, they're clearer, and they are more rigorous. They are tied directly to a path to college and career readiness, starting from kindergarten through grade 12. So they progress from the earliest years, from kindergarten and elementary grades, right up through 12th grade, and they really provide a staircase of readiness so that students will be ready to enter general education, entry-level, first-year courses at the college level, or entry-level jobs and post-secondary training programs that prepare them for the future. My next slide is a graphic that shows this process. It really started, as I said, back in 2005. It was a state-led process. 48 states participated in the drafting process. As it turns out, of those 48, 46 have adopted since then. And now, as you can see in the blue box, states are in this period of implementation, which is ongoing across the country. It varies from state to state depending on where the state began its work and the timing of that work. But throughout the 46 states that have adopted the Common Core, there are many, many educators involved, K-12, higher ed, in this work to provide really strong implementation of these new standards. Next slide. And I'm going to turn this over to Kenny.
Thank you, Lucille. One thing I wanted to input at this point is in the development of the standard, they did include some limitations to the standards to help folks out, and with my staff, it really kind of helped us out a lot. But some things that the standards do not define, as you can see, is they're not telling teachers how to teach. What they're trying to do with the standard is clarify what it is students should be taught at the various grade levels, but it's not how to do it, it's just what to do to help clean up the lines from state to state and district to district. Although my teachers have a hard time believing this part, it says that the standards do not define all that can or should be taught. When they first started looking at the Common Core standards, the first question that came to their mind is, how could there possibly be any other time available? But the more we've dug into it, we're discovering that because the nature of elementary anyhow is a lot of thematic and cross-curricular information being taught together, we can get them, we feel like we can get them all taught. The other thing they do not do is they don't really go into advanced work beyond the core. As we've been going out to workshops and reading on the Common Core, especially some of Marzano's most recent information on looking at the Common Core standards, he's presented what he calls rating scales. And those rating scales are on they're kind of a 4-point scale. Not really a rubric, although it's somewhat like a rubric, but the rating scales only really focus on proficiency, that number 3 as to what it looks like or what they're recommending it would look like that for a student to be proficient on a particular standard. So it's going to be left up to the local or states to decide what is advanced work beyond the Common Core. The other area that they did not include, or they're working on, at least the way they're written right now, is the interventions needed for students well below grade level are not clearly defined. That's an area that in our state we're looking at, and in our district we're looking at, but it is of very much of concern as to how do we handle the students on IEPs and those that are our bubble kids, are most at-risk students. So we had to come to that. We had to grasp that reality that the Common Core standards do not define any of the bullets listed on this page. Next slide, please, and back to Lucille.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the highlights of the English Language Arts Common Core standards, and just to point out some of the major changes, the shifts in these standards from perhaps from what your current state standards have had in them. So the first is a focus on text complexity. Research tells us that the complexity of what is read is equally important to how well that material is actually read. And so attending to text complexity is an important change. These standards are very specific about the need to progress from kindergarten through 12th grade to more and more complex reading materials. And that does not mean that we're putting Shakespeare before our 4th graders, but it does mean that we need to be conscious of the kind of complexity in what we are asking students to read as they advance through the grade levels. Over time, I think what we found was complexity had really slipped. And the goal is to get students to college and career-ready reading levels by the end of high school. So by 11th and certainly by 12th grade, they should be reading materials that are the equivalent to the kinds of things they will face in the workforce or face in a college course. And we've got to be attentive to that if we're going to ensure that that happens. What we've seen is that, we've got middle school students who are reading right now materials that are still at an elementary grade level, and high school students are being given materials that are at a middle school level, and that really needs to change, and that's one of the things that you've got to be focusing on. The second major change is this balance between literature and informational or nonfiction texts. Now, this is probably the biggest change in the elementary schools, and I would think a welcome one, and certainly a good one, in classrooms that perhaps have been, because of No Child Left Behind, focusing more on literature in ELA and mathematics, and really doing that by minimizing science and social studies and some of the other content areas. By bringing in literature, informational texts from other content areas, the elementary school classroom now can have students reading science materials appropriate and at grade level to help develop their literacy skills. The balance should be about 50-50 in the elementary school according to these standards. Right now, in most elementary school classrooms, less than 10% on average of what students are reading and being exposed to is in the nonfiction/informational category. So this really does allow elementary schools to bring those other content areas back into the classroom, back into the everyday instructional process, and to help build background knowledge for students, which will help them succeed as they progress through the grades and begin to take on more and more difficult work in those other content areas. A third big shift is in the kind of writing that we're asking students to do. Most state standards until now have asked students to master the writing of narratives. And that's certainly a good thing. These standards still include the writing of narratives without question. They're not being eliminated. But they also are asking teachers to expand that writing to include writing to inform or persuade, and to use evidence to persuade or inform someone. And so that is a shift, and it really means writing to those nonfiction or informational texts as well. And those two pieces, obviously, in literacy development fit nicely together. The speaking and listening skills are incorporated and integrated throughout these standards at each grade level. It's certainly a recognition that the changing workforce demands that students can speak and do presentations, and also listen to others, do research, and make presentations with a group, do work in a group, and present that and share that information and evidence that's been gathered with other students, and certainly, again, because those are the kinds of things they'll be asked to do in the workforce. The media and technology standards are no longer standalones, which is what most states have had. They're now totally integrated in these standards. The students in our rooms today are 21st century digital natives. They know a world that is none other than filled with digital, and so it needs to be part of instruction. It's certainly going to be used as part of the assessments as well. So it's important that we begin to integrate that technology in everything that's going on throughout the instructional process. Of not as much interest to all of you at the elementary level, but certainly what you should know is that at the secondary level, there are actually separate standards, literacy standards, in the content areas, in science, social studies, and the technical subjects. So that in grades where students are no longer in self-contained classrooms, whether upper elementary, middle school, etc., there are separate standards so that those content teachers will also be working to develop literacy skills in those particular content areas. So we're not asking the science teacher to teach literature, nor are we asking the English classroom teacher to teach social studies or science, but we are asking those teachers to teach literacy in their content areas. And then I'll move on now to the mathematics highlights. Next slide. The first is attention to focus and coherence. And that is, in math, the focus is really about narrowing the number of concepts that are expected to be taught and learned at each grade level. As you probably know, we've had this mile-wide, inch-deep approach to math, a little bit on many, many, many topics at every grade level, particularly in the elementary grades. A few days on this concept, a few days on that. Teachers not really having an opportunity to help students develop deep understanding. And that changes in these standards. There are fewer expectations at each grade level, but there is an expectation that students will develop deeper understanding. With respect to the coherence, that's really about helping students see how the math connects together and how the math concepts make sense and integrate with one another. So one example is multiplication, and the connection between simple arithmetic and multiplication and area, which is really an application of multiplication. So helping students to see how those concepts fit together. The math standards, in another shift, really sort of answer the question that's been out there now for a while about, should students just be memorizing the facts and the algorithms, the procedures, or should they be developing deep understanding? And what the standards say, the Common Core standards say, they need to do both. They need to internalize those mathematics facts, the addition and the subtraction and the multiplication and the division and how you add fractions and those kinds of things, and the properties. They need to know those things internally. But they also need to understand the mathematics that underlies those concepts. And that's the only way that we'll be sure that they'll be able to use those skills later as the math gets much more complex and more challenging in the upper grades. The standards have a careful progression of skills in terms of their development. Skills are built upon skills that came before them in a very thoughtful way. In elementary school mathematics, the standards are really building a very strong foundation for algebra. One of the things that we know from data and research is that a huge stumbling block for students in high school and in the upper grades in algebra particularly is a lack of deep understanding about fractions. And so these standards really attempt to correct that. Students cannot do higher level math without deep understanding of those mathematics foundations. And the standards, I believe, do a great job of allowing teachers to do that kind of skill development in a very reasoned and thoughtful progression. There's an emphasis in the standards as well on problem solving so that students can see the connection of mathematics to their everyday life. It certainly also helps them to get at the 21st century skills of critical thinking and problem solving and actually applying what they are learning instead of just spitting back what they've been taught to memorize. Finally, this point about the skills and the standards are the floor for the grade level and not the ceiling. These standards prepare students to take algebra in grade 9, but we know that in some states students are actually required to take algebra sooner than that, and in many cases students take algebra sooner than 9th grade because they are ready to do that. So certainly if they've mastered the skills that are included in the standards in K-8, then the students will have the foundation that's required for success in algebra and the math that follows. And so you should definitely consider advancing students along the way once they've mastered the standards in math at a particular grade level. It's the floor, it's the minimum. No student should leave that grade without mastering those grade level standards. And now it's back to Kenny.
Yeah, so I began working or becoming a little bit more involved with the Common Core standards in January of 2011, a little over a year now. And my biggest concern was how were we going to transition to the Common Core here in Powell and in the state of Wyoming. And so I attended a conference out in Portland, and probably the 2 days out there, the one bit of information or the one slide I saw that probably had the greatest effect on me was the one that's before you right now, the Achieve August 2010. And I have to say this slide has been the focus of what I've been doing with my staff for the past 13 or 14 months. And the most important piece there that we've been working on here is that you just have to get your teachers or the educators familiar with the new standards. One thing we've discovered is I would not call it professional development. It has certainly been professional work. However, we've learned a great deal, largely in the area of just what are the Common Core standards, and then we've even started looking at then how is that going to affect us. But so we've been spending a lot of time, and we've set aside our book studies that we typically have done during the year for professional development, and we've been taking a look at some documents that our State Department has provided us either directly from themselves or from McCrel out of Denver. The second part of this slide, though, is very important too, because one thing my teachers have asked is that to wrap our brains around the Common Core standards, the first question was, well, can we see what the assessment will look like? What's the design going to be? And the latter part of this slide does mention that is as soon as those samples or examples are available from either of the two consortia working on the assessment, we need to be taking a look at those as well, because they will have an effect on what we ultimately end up with our curriculum and instruction. So it really is important that the staff does this work. You have to get, I believe you have to get the Common Core standards in front of your teachers, and you have to, as a group, you have to dive into them. One of my teachers even made a comment as we were going through, it's probably not the sexiest work we've ever done, but it's necessary work that needs to be done. Okay, next slide. One thing with the Common Core too, I've discovered in visiting with principals around the country is a lot of us are at the mercy of our State Departments. And one thing I would recommend for those of you that are in this implementation process is I would go out and Google and take a look at State Departments of Education of other states. I've utilized Ohio. I've looked at Massachusetts just because they were references that were provided to me. I'd heard speakers from those states that pointed me to those states. But another part of the Common Core that I'm feeling is a strength is because they're common across the country, we actually can beg, borrow, and steal from one another to see what other folks are doing with the standards and what resources are out there, because it's a, you know, the Common Core is the Common Core, we feel like. So the one thing our State Department did provide for us is what we call the Wyoming's Common Core State Standards Crosswalk. And what our State Department did was they pulled a group, our language arts standards statewide group together, and they took a look at our current state assessment, which is called the pause, and they just highlighted the skills that were on the pause that were not sufficiently addressed in the Common Core State Standards. So I printed that document off, and that's a document that I provided to my staff as we went through this, because it's important to us to understand that if we're going to move towards teaching to the Common Core standards, that we're not going to be in direct alignment with our state assessment, because we're going to be utilizing our current state assessment written to our current state standards probably for the next 2 years, if not just one. But we're thinking, the word we're hearing, it's going to be in 2013 and 2014. But we can't wait that long to begin teaching the standards. So we utilized this document letting us know it provided us information. So they looked at they took the pause skills and told us where they would be found in the Common Core standards, and then they even provided us some instructional strategies. So the Common Core Crosswalk, and I don't know how many states have done that, but it would be something that, you know, I would check, and if your State Department has it, that it's a document your teachers will want to see, especially those that are teaching in a grade level, 3rd, 4th, or 5th, or 6th grade, or through 8th grade, that's being assessed on your statewide assessment. Another, on to the next slide. Another document that I provided to my staff is the Wyoming Common Core Standards Gap Analysis, and this was provided us from our State Department, but actually the State Department contracted with McCrel out of Denver, and what they basically did is they took our state standards and laid them next to the Common Core standards, and they would tell us, take a look at our, as an example of language arts standards, then they would tell us if it had a weak alignment or a strong alignment with the Common Core standard at that particular grade level. So that really helped us to have another set of eyes take a look at our standards and truly see if our state standards were in line with what we were currently doing. So it was nice, again, that the State Department provided us with some work already done. So we took the crosswalk, we took the gap analysis, and then of course we had the Common Core standards. But so the first charge that I gave to my staff, and Honor, if you'd go to the next slide please, was that I had the staff take a look at the gap analysis and the crosswalk review, and I posed 3 questions to my staff. The 3 questions that you see up here is, as you read through these documents, what will it mean to the students? What's the end result? What do we see the end result being? And how are they going to impact my teacher, as a teacher, how are they going to impact your classroom? And then I just asked them, how do you feel we should transition into these standards? It was rather interesting, some of the feedback I got. I received a great deal of feedback from my staff because I asked them to, they had to type it up for me and get it back to me, because I wanted to put it in a document that we could share amongst ourselves. And there were a lot of similarities going through the documents and the standards with my staff, but it became very clear that moving to these standards was going to be a rather daunting process. It instilled, folks were looking at it anxiously. Some folks are saying, yes, we need to go here. It definitely raises the bar for us. Others were concerned about maybe the bar is being raised too high. We were just all over the board, as I think most people, most principals, when they're dealing with their staff, they are feeling the same way. We went from, as far as transition to the standards, my staff went from, give them to us now, let's just jump in and let's do them all at once, to let's go subject by subject. Maybe let's take the reading or the writing or the math and let's jump into those and begin instructing or begin using them in the classroom there. But basically what we came up with after we looked at all of this information, went back through it, is we together kind of created a transition plan, but mostly it was a bunch of questions that we created, and we're working as a building and within our district to answer those questions. And so next slide, please. The first area that we looked at when we went to our transition plan was in the area of curriculum instruction. You can see it seemed like reading through the documents we created more questions than we received answers, but I think that's why we're able to be where we are now, because we do have some good questions out there, and we do have we have a focus of what we feel we need to get done to begin teaching to the Common Core standards. And right now, our district, we're still not firm on when we're going to do that, but it's certainly looking like this fall we're going to begin some implementation of the Common Core standards, and we've spent some time this year in the building and as a district working towards that. So in the curriculum instruction, we've kind of got the crosswalk piece done. Big question we've been dealing with is, what do we do when we encounter differences between our district curricula and the Common Core, and that largely has been initially when we first came up with this. We were seeing Common Core standards that are written in the 3rd grade level that are appearing closer to our 4th and 5th grade standards. So we're looking at how are we going to create that shift down to other grade levels, and that's been a big question that we've had, and we've been working at it. We've been doing some horizontal and vertical articulation with our district staff, and in my building we've had some discussions about that, but there are going to be differences, and we know that, and so we kind of we're relying on our vertical articulation to help us out with that. So curriculum instruction was a big piece that we were concerned about first and foremost, and we're fortunate again that we have a supportive district that is understanding, and they see where we're coming from, and so we're actually provided time within our school calendar. We have early release times throughout the year, and we have professional development days that we've been afforded that time to get some of these questions answered, or at least begin working on the process of getting these questions answered. So, because time will be the biggest issue. It will be the greatest issue, I think, that building level principals will come across in implementing the curriculum and instruction. The next area that we focus on our transition. So, Honor, if you'd go to the next slide, please.
Can I interrupt for just a moment?
Sure. Sure thing.
I have a question from Robert Severa. He's asking exactly when will sample assessments be made available?
Well, I can tell you right now. Wyoming has signed on with Smarter Balanced, the Measured Progress Consortia, and actually Smarter Balance has sample problems on their website right now. I wish I had I think if you just Google Smarter Balance Consortium, you might be able to get off of the website some samples there. They do have some mathematic test items and some language arts items. I don't know about Park. I don't know if Lucille is aware if Park has any samples available or not.
Yes. Well, first of all, the links to both of them are in the resource list at the end of the presentation, which folks will have. The link to Smarter Balanced and Park are both on there. they're both developing items. I don't think Park has any available yet, but they have groups of teachers working around the country right now on the creation of the sample assessment items. I think that it's pretty uniformly agreed that teachers want to see what the tasks will look like, and that they're likely to be different than what have appeared on most state assessments, because most of our states have been using primarily multiple choice questions, and these assessments will have open-ended questions included in them, performance tasks where students will have to explain why they've done a math problem a certain way, or why they've read something and drawn a certain conclusion, what evidence they've found in the text, and that kind of thing. So I think it is something that folks are waiting for, but they're both consortia have teachers involved in this work and are going to provide as quickly as possible throughout the development process examples, so teachers have something to to look at and kind of work from in terms of the way they'll understand what their students will be asked to do.
Thanks, Lucille. Does that answer the question, do you feel, Honor? Are there any other before I need to go on?
Yes, thank you very much. No, there's no others. You can keep going here.
Okay, so the next area then we looked at, of course, assessments. We're fortunate in our district that we've had some professional development in the area of assessments. We had Karen Hess from the Center for Assessment come in and spend a week with our staff working very much at reading a standard or reading a benchmark and being able to take a look at the way that benchmark or standard is written and then write an assessment that is at that level. So we're very cognizant of making sure that if a standard is written at a certain depth of knowledge, that the assessment is written at the same way. This again created some anxiety with our staff here, because we still are. We're very focused skill-based with our professional learning communities. We've identified essential skills, and as Lucille mentioned, yeah, we've largely been multiple choice types of questions. We have had some constructed and extended response types of questions in our reading and math, but a big anxiety attack for us is when we look at the way the Common Core standards are written. They are certainly written at a higher level than what ours are. So we have concern there, and that's why it's been nice for us. And we're glad that our state is working with Smarter Balance, and we've taken a look at some of the sample questions, the draft questions I believe that they've given us, and I can honestly say I don't know if they're glad to have seen them or not glad to have seen them, because they certainly make you take a deep breath when you're looking at assessing a third grader or a fourth grader or a fifth grader on some of these, especially in the area of math, some of our math stuff. So as we're working through, a question that we have too then is when we implement the Common Core standards, when do we modify our district assessments, if it's at all necessary? And that's something again that we're going to probably break into next year, is taking a looking at our alignment along with the Common Core standards, and then determining what we want those assessments to look like. And we're the kind of the hot word right now is that we're looking at probably more, might even include more project-based kind of assessments, where we're going to assess maybe more than one standard, certainly more than one skill within a standard, because that's what we've done with our essential skills, is we've been kind of assessing just the skills and not the entire standard. So that's going to be a very big adjustment for us in our district, and again a painful one, but it's one that you want to go in carefully, and because we're beginning to see some samples, I think it's going to direct us, so hopefully our time isn't spent headed down the wrong road. So next slide then, the third piece that we came out of when we did our comparison, looked at the crosswalk and the gap analysis and the Common Core, is in the area of professional development. And we started this last spring, and really there were not a whole lot of workshops, or there was not a whole lot of information out there in the area of Common Cores. Of course, now building level principals know about it. Every other email you're receiving, somebody has their answer to implementing the Common Core standards. So it's coming out there. Because of regional location with McCrel, we use McCrel, or I do. I go to them and I use their resources, McCrel and Northwest Labs out of Portland, and then Barb Marzano's site I've been using just to keep reading on it, just try to keep up as much as possible. And so what we, teachers are concerned with, content. It's been a long time. If some of these standards are going to be pushed down into grade levels they haven't been at before, we might need to sharpen our saw in just our content knowledge in math and reading, as well as continue to maybe go back and revisit pedagogy, making sure which is the best. My staff, we did do a book study on classroom instruction that works to help us revisit or relive, rejuvenate what instructional techniques seem to be proven to be the most effective. And then again, when are we going to do this? We have it set up where we do have instructional facilitators that are master teachers within the district, and each of the elementary buildings here have an instructional facilitator. So we rely heavy on them to provide some of this professional development locally. We're also fortunate that we can send folks out to conferences and seminars to bring information back to the staff so that we can get the greatest bang for our buck. Excuse me. Then lastly, the thing there for us is that, again, that principals need to work with their district, because as I mentioned earlier, I think probably the greatest issue that we've dealt with and have somewhat overcome it is just that issue of time. We're probably even looking at this summer and probably summers thereafter that it's going to require some teacher time, some committee work, some curriculum work over the summertime to get this laid out the way that we feel it will best meet the needs and serve our students. Next slide. I think back to Lucille.
So this is a list of resources that are available. The first is the Hunt Institute website. There's lots of resources on there. Corestandards.org is where you can find the standards in their entirety. If you go to that website, you click on a link on there that actually says the standards. It's over on the right side. CCSSO.org is the Chief State School Officers Group. The next two are Smarter Balanced and Park Online, the two assessment consortia websites. And the one that follows, the Illustrative Math project, is something, multiple projects actually out of the University of Arizona, where they're working on many different math supports for teaching of the math standards, including kind of writing progressions in a narrative that actually demonstrates how all the math concepts connect to one another. The following one, Achieve the Core, is done by Student Achievement Partners. There are lots of resources on there, some exemplar lessons. There's also a series of videos on YouTube that the Hunt Institute put together where the lead writers, the co-chairs of the writing teams of the ELA and math standards speak about the standards in their entirety, talk about the shifts and the changes, and really go into some of these topics in a little bit more depth as well. And then this final slide just has Kenny's information and mine as well, if you have questions that you want to pose to either of us. And ESP obviously also has lots of resources available to all of you.
Okay, thank you so much, Lucille. At this point, we're going to break. This is the end of the official webinar, but we want to have a moment for questions. We did have one question written in, and that was to you, Kenny, and the question was, what book did your staff use to study? And,
the one we used was Marzano's Classroom Instruction That Works. and actually they've just recently re-released it. They've kind of updated it. I think it was this last fall, but it was a good book study that we did 2 springs ago, I believe. But it's a very good book to go back and take a look at. He did a meta-analysis of effective classroom instructional strategies, and he identified those in his book.
Wonderful.
And you can it's an ASCD publication.
Great, and I think we'll post it up on our webinar site for resources. So if you want to, wait till we have this posted. Are there any other questions of our panelists? This has been a wonderful presentation. Let's take a moment to write in your questions under the question bar, and we will open it up for a few minutes. Okay, any questions? A question came in just now. We've done a preliminary analysis of the topics in the 98th grade math curriculum, and we noticed it does not address 8th grade anymore. Any comments on that?
Could you restate that question, Honor?
Yeah, I'm trying to read it here. Okay, the topic of probability is not addressed in 8th grade anymore. I have that as.
I'm happy to take that.
Okay.
In general, the prior state standards in some cases had data and statistics and probability down right into the elementary grades. And these standards take a lot of the data and statistics out, and they really begin in the 6th grade with the attention on data. And again, it's how all that connects to what students are learning at a particular grade level. The 8th grade standards, I'm pretty sure, I know they have some data and statistics. They may not have probability specifically. Probability may be connected to what they're doing in 6th or 7th grade. But I do know that at the secondary level, what were the traditional algebra, geometry classes, and those standards now have embedded within them the elements of statistics, which of course includes probability and all the data work in it as well. Those are embedded within the high school standards from grade 9 through 12. So I think what you'll see is, although probability may not appear at each grade level from 6th grade on up, it is certainly covered in the standards and covered in depth, because there is a clear recognition that for many students in the workforce following high school, statistics and data will be far more important to them than, let's say, calculus would be. That many more jobs require an understanding of data and statistics than require advanced calculus. So in order to really develop young people to be not only ready for the workforce in college, but also to be good citizens, statistics is a very important component, and the standards make that point very clearly.
Wonderful. Here's another question. What is your suggestion to get faculty buy-in? Is it just jump in and start understanding the standard or such, or do you suggest that we wait on state and district?
Well, I would take that one. I think because it's coming. If you're in a state that your state has adopted the Common Core state standards, I think it's clear that the governor and the state superintendent or the chief state school officer is looking for a better set of standards. I know in ours it even goes down to our state legislature is behind it. But the focus we took, I did with my staff is the bottom line is, that that they are coming, but you know, let's get a jump on these, and it's what's best for kids. Our ultimate goal is to make sure kids are prepared either for college or the workforce, and the Common Core standards is going to give us that guidance to get them there. So I really didn't have a big challenge with my staff on convincing them to get in, but I think a lot of it probably came from my attitude about the Common Cores, and yeah, it's a daunting task, but I think it's a task that the end result we will feel very proud about.
Well, and I would add, look, I think school leaders are the most critical partners in this work. You're the educational leader of your staff and your team, and you have a great opportunity to really inspire your staff and lead them as they begin to dig into this work. As Kenny has said, there are changes, and they're going to require the way instruction is delivered to be modified, to be changed, to be done differently. The standards, the assessments rather, are going to measure skills that many of our state tests have not measured to this point. So there are clearly changes coming. I would also recommend that you give your teachers time as much as you can, particularly beginning in the next school year, time to collaborate and work together. There's no reason why teachers should be doing this work alone, in their classrooms alone with the door closed. At grade levels, they ought to be working together, and they ought to work in groups that are focused on specific content together as well. There's great opportunity here, because these standards are now shared among 46 states, for your teachers to take from and learn from what's going on in other states. And different states are in different places, as I mentioned earlier, and there are resources being developed almost every day where teachers are really digging in and beginning to make these standards come alive in instruction and in lessons. So I would recommend that you give teachers time to really work with the standards together, to look and see not only how they're different, but how they will need to transform and change their instruction in order to help students master the standards.
Okay, next question. Are you aware of any work being done with identifying essential skills within the CCS by subject area and grade level?
Well, I know Park County School District #1 is trying to, because I think the big term that folks are looking at out there is unpacking the standards, which is very, very laborious, we have discovered. So I wish we could find a resource that was doing this out there with the Common Core, but as of today, we haven't found any, and we're still having that discussion, is if we're truly going to be teaching to the Common Core and assessing the Common Core, how much breaking down into essential skills can we get if we want to be assessing the entire standard at a higher depth of knowledge? So that's kind of the boxing match we're in right now with ourselves. One day we think we need to do it, and then another day we're thinking maybe we should try focusing on the standards, not breaking it down. But the kids do need that foundation at the elementary level, especially K2. We have to build those skills. So
well, and
that's an outstanding question.
But that's a really good point, Kenny, that these standards, there are really 10 standards in reading and 10 standards in writing, and they are the same standards throughout the grades. They develop through a progression, but there are not that many standards at each grade level, and so it is important to be focused on all of those standards and to teach students to all of those standards. I believe that both assessment consortia will show the skills that are most likely to be tested in certain ways as they do their work. But I think that the writers of the standards have talked a little bit and have been making some presentations on standards that depend on other ones within a single grade level. But for the most part, these standards have been pared down so that they're all important skills and they're all necessary to build the foundation. And there's not a lot of repetition, as our standards used to have, where we would teach children how to add fractions you know, in the 3rd grade, again in the 4th grade, again in the 5th grade, again in the 6th grade, and then one more time in the 7th grade. There are finish points where it's expected that students have mastered the skills.
Okay, we are at the end of our session. If you like, we can keep with the questions. We can probably take like one more, but then I think we'll probably have to shut this down. And those of you that have written your emails, we will send those to our panelists and have them reply to you. So the next question that we have is, do you know if other assessments beyond the state assessments, such as the NAEP, or NWEA, MAP tests are correlated with the new Common Core standards?
If the assessments...
I don't know about NAEP.
Go ahead, Kenny.
Go ahead, Lou. Okay. I don't know about the NAEP. I would imagine that the NAEP was probably looked at when the Common Core were written, but as far as NWEA, we've utilized NWEA for about the past 8 years, and we're continuing to do so. I think they're in the process. Last I heard is it was something they were working on to try to get their assessments aligned to the Common Core, understanding that so many states are buying in. So I would full well expect within the next couple of years that NWA would be aligned to the Common Core, just like they're aligned to individual state standards right now. But I think that would be a question if you could just email the folks out in Portland. I think they would be able to respond to that better than me. But the word that we're hearing is yes, they are in the process of doing that.
Here's another question. Exactly when, do either of you know exactly when sample assessments will be made available?
My understanding is that they're going to have items. I mean, they know that, you know, school leaders and educators are waiting for these, and that they're planning to have items no later than this fall. Some sample items no later than this fall. I think I know that Park is assembling these teams of teachers in every state that's participating in the Park Consortium to be working on items, to be reviewing items, and that kind of thing. So and I'm fairly certain Smarter Balance is in the same process. They've actually got a contract out right now, I think, for the writing of sample items. So, I mean, it's coming from both. They both know that everybody is waiting for this. And so they know there's a real sense of urgency that they've got to address.
Wonderful. Here's a great question. For somebody totally new to this process, is there a first step you would recommend that we should take, a conference to attend or a website to begin with or something?
No, I don't know. Just jump in. I do know that, and I have not attended, but our curriculum director in town has attended a couple of times. But I know in June there is a group that has a conference in Chicago on the Common Core standards, and he's told us that it's outstanding. Actually, he would like us to take teams of teachers to it. But that might be a good first start. I wished I had the information. Whoever asked the question, if they want to email me, I can track down the name of that conference. But RJ is he speaks nothing but high accord of the conference out in Chicago regarding Common Core.
I would also recommend that you talk with your district level leadership and see what, if anything, the district may be doing or what the district has from the state. Some of the states are going to be rolling work out in the fall or in the late summer. They haven't begun it, because the school year is coming to an end. So, I would check and see what, if anything, the state is doing from a leadership perspective. With NAESP and NASSP, the Hunt Institute is sponsoring a statewide meeting in Michigan, for example, in a couple weeks in May for principals and school leaders throughout the state to attend. We're doing that in partnership with the local or the state affiliate organizations in Michigan. We're looking at doing something similar in Alabama. There are all kinds of opportunities. ASCD has lots of resources available. They're holding statewide meetings. A lot of the websites that I gave you will give you links that are on that I went through on that resource list. that will give you links to lots of information. I would also recommend, though, that you go in and read the standards. You should see how these standards are different than the kind of standards that you have had in the past.
Okay, here's another one. How are these standards being communicated to parents?
Well, that's a great question. The National PTA has been involved in this, and they're partnering with their state affiliate organizations as well. They have a set of parent guides that explain at each grade level the kinds of changes that parents should think about. That's not one of the resources that I had room to list on that resource page, but we can certainly get that to Honor so that she can share that with folks. I think if you just go to nationalpta.org or pta.org, you can pick up a link to those guides that are available. There's a recognition that parents need to know about this too, because these are changes. What their children are going to do at a particular grade is going to be different in the future, and if they've got older children who've already been through those grades, they're going to wonder why they're not doing A, B, or C at that grade level. And they need to know there's a reason, and that it's thoughtful, and that it is what's supposed to be done. So there is a clear acknowledgement that parents need to be communicated with and to have a good understanding of these changes as well.
That's a great suggestion, Lucille. We'll add that to our website under resources. Here's another question. How do you involve PE, music, art, etc. teachers in the implementation process?
Well, what I have done, because my classroom teachers are responsible for the art, with my PE and music folks, they have been involved all along with the readings as we've gone through the Common Cores and looked at the crosswalk and a gap analysis. One thing we're working on in Wyoming, of course, is everybody wants to be held accountable, or the powers that be want all the teachers to be held accountable. So we have the teachers of record issue going on as to how does a PE teacher or how does a music teacher, how do student achievement scores get tied to what they're doing in their classroom. And basically what we're doing here is that just making those folks aware of what is expected at each grade level in the area of English language arts and math. We just ask them to incorporate any type of math opportunity or reading opportunity that they may have to try and use the same vocabulary. It's probably the biggest thing, is just utilizing the vocabulary with our students. So really it's more of what the teachers are saying or planning for to help support the instruction that's going on in the classroom.
I'm also a huge fan of professional learning communities and a recognition that everyone in the school, on the staff, is part of student success, and that it's a team effort. And I think that when you're talking about developing literacy skills, mathematics skills, every teacher can play a role in that, no matter what the content area, even if these standards are not written specifically for their content area. Certainly in physical education, I can think of lots of opportunities for teachers to be developing math skills without question. And there are lots of examples of that. But I really think you want teachers working together, because in terms of literacy development, it's got to be broader than just expecting the individual English teacher or the single classroom self-contained teacher to carry the work completely on his or her own shoulders.
Great suggestion. Here's another question. Is there a resource you would recommend that contains templates of planning tools specifically that would guide staff on their journey to delve into the CCS? For example, is there a good crosswalk template that you would recommend?
I'm fairly certain that at achieve.org you can find a template to crosswalk the standards. I think they developed that, and I'm fairly certain it's available. That's achieve.org. That's separate from Achieve the Core. And so that's out there and available for people to use. I think that's probably a great starting point. The Illustrative Mathematics Project, which I have listed on the resource page, they've done some really nice work around the crosswalk idea as well, only in mathematics. So you might find some resources there too. And by the way, it is PTA.org is the national PTA website, and you can find those parent guides right on that national PTA. It's just PTA.org website.
So with that, I will close this webinar down, and thank you, Lucille. Thank you, Kenny. We really appreciate all of your expertise.